You're back behind the mic.
Does it feel like university again?
Does feel a bit like student radio, yeah. First job in radio was cutting out match points at Wimbledon in a bunker underneath centre court for 2 weeks. It was amazing. Like, the hours were insane. It was a real baptism of fire. Producing or working on live sport, there's nothing like that thrill. The focus we have on women's sport now, I just don't think I would have ever thought that possible when I first started my career. It just wasn't a thing. So now that we think about it on a level playing field, and it's strategically as important to me as my men's sport podcasts, that feels like such a moment.
Empowering the future of sports industry leadership for everyone committed to fair representation in sport. You're now listening to the Sports Pro New Era podcast.
Hello and welcome to the New Era podcast. I'm Katie Preston, Head of Projects at Sports Pro, and I'm joined today by my co-host Elena Kouyoufa, Content Manager at Sports Pro. We are also joined by Alexandra Adey, Senior Partnerships Manager at The Ringer UK at Spotify, and also a member of our New Era class this year. So welcome both. How are we?
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you for joining us on a lovely Friday morning. We're in the Spotify studios. Thank you, Alex.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming in.
It's our debut in a studio, I must say. We've never...
Normally behind the camera as well, for Alex at least.
Just lock a podcaster in here and make him do some content and then just leave him to it. This is very new for me.
Where do we kick things off? It's been a very exciting time with women's sport over the summer. I've seen a lot of TikToks of little girls emulating Chloe Kelly's amazing penalty shoot. And yeah, what have been the highlights that I'm sure you both tuned in? Anything that stood out to you? I don't know if you went down to the parade.
I did not, unfortunately, although it was very close to our offices in London, so I was actually quite gutted to miss out on that. But I think for me, what was really cool about the Euros was that I was a bit nervous going into it, basically, with all the big sort of retirements that we've had over the past couple of months. A bit nervous to see how England would actually fare, but we did pretty well. We came on top, so can't complain.
Home.
It is home. It's back home. But were you following it much, Alex?
Yeah, I did. I watched it all. And I was the same as you. I was a little bit nervy going in because I think England are obviously amazing, but there were so many other teams in the tournament who'd really come on since the last Euros and even the last World Cup. I thought France were going to do it. So I was surprised they didn't get to the final. I thought it was going to be England-France, our first game, and then an England-France final. And that didn't happen because Germany beat France in the semis, I think. Or the quarters, can't remember now. God, it feels like so long ago.
It does feel like a long time ago.
Because we're about to go into the next women's sports tournament this summer. But yeah, I was a bit nervy, but I mean, it was incredible. And we were quite lucky that we had 2 women's football podcasts in Switzerland covering it. So even though I wasn't there, I got to live vicariously through everyone who was out there, which was really nice. So just seeing the content coming back was amazing. And yeah, we're really, really proud of what we did with it.
Super. Yeah, you can tell us a bit more on that in a moment. But I think if we track back to kind of how you've ended up here at Spotify, it's a super exciting and nice position you've got over here. A lot of sports podcasts that you are covering. So take us back. Did you always want to be in the kind of the sports field, in the podcast? How have you ended up here?
Good question. And I'll try and not do a long rambling story about it. But I've always loved sport. Grew up in like a bit of a sporty family. My mum was a PE teacher. My dad played rugby. I got taken to my first football match when I was 5. My dad loves watching like all sport. So I always loved it, football particularly. And I really wanted to be a journalist. And then I was like, it's quite hard work being a journalist. So I went to Lancaster University and they've got an amazing student radio station there. Okay. So I got quite into student radio because I'm a really cool guy. Yeah. So spent a lot of time doing that and I thought, this might be a kind of cool way to be sort of in media but not have to like write loads. So did that and then I did a master's in radio at Goldsmiths in London. And that was a long time ago now. That was back in 2012. So podcasting was becoming a thing, but not what it is now, obviously. The industry's grown so rapidly and so quickly. It's very different to what I think we thought it was going to be then. A lot of the stuff we were listening to and learning about on that course was like really high quality American public radio that was being made into podcasts like This American Life and Radiolab, which is still stuff that's going on, but very different to a lot of bits of the podcast industry now. And from Goldsmiths, I got an internship at IMG. So my first job in radio was cutting out match points at Wimbledon for producers, like in a bunker underneath centre court, for 2 weeks. It was amazing. Like the hours were insane. It was a real baptism of fire in terms of learning lots of the nuts and bolts of being like an audio producer and audio editor, like quick turnarounds, just like having to, especially in the first week of Wimbledon when there's like 18 matches going on at once or however many it is. So that was the kind of best training course you could want, really. Did that, and then IMG have a small audio department there, and they asked me to come back and do a bit of freelance work for them on a Premier League podcast. So they did an official Premier League podcast on a Monday after the weekend's football, and they'd also just had a Champions League live audio show commissioned. So I did a few days a week freelancing there, and eventually that turned into a full-time job. So I spent a few years there working on everything, again, like a proper baptism of fire in terms of just having stuff slung at you. So my job was a bit half and half there. So I did a lot of like production management, scheduling, booking commentators for live audio feeds of football matches, and then a lot of like APing, so assistant production, editing audio, like being an assistant producer on live shows, a lot of making tea. So I make a great cup of tea now. It's very good training there.
Yeah, it was the first thing you offered us coming into here, but we ended up with a nice glass of water. But I'm sure you do a great job.
I really do, and I honestly think that is one of the most underrated skills. Just being
I
able
actually
to,
think
like,
in the UK, I think it is
100%. A good cup of coffee, a good cup of tea, and just making someone feel like you know welcome
at
and
home.
100%. So I did that, and then part of what we did there, so IMG would offer like an audio service to broadcasters, but also like organisations. So would partner with Wimbledon to be their official radio station for the tournament, partner with UEFA to be their official match night radio show for Champions League, and that would go out on their website. But then we'd also cut the last half hour of the live show and like release it as a podcast. So you'd get a bit of extra kind of life in the audio, and then it also acted as like a really nice sort of, you know, summary of what had happened. So we did that, and then I got quite interested in like the distribution of that, how we could make it more effective, and we worked with a company called Audio Boom to distribute that content, and I then ended up moving to Audio Boom to work on their sports podcasts, which was quite an interesting time because it was a bit of managing content they already had at the company, but also going to like football clubs or organisations and being like, why don't you make a podcast? And this is 10 years ago. No one really knew like what the effect of podcasts were or how that could work for a club or an organisation or just, you know. So that was really interesting. And then I spent 2 years there. So I didn't really do too much production there, more account management. And then Spotify were really getting into the podcast space, and they built a team here, and they needed someone who'd done a bit of production and a bit of like account management, partnerships work, which that was me. So I came here 7.5 years ago. So I've been here a while.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I came here as, not in a sports role really, I came here as the sort of first hire on the podcast team to build Spotify's relationships with the wider industry, but also start thinking about commissioning original content for the UK. So at that time, I think Spotify had about 30,000 podcasts on platform, and now we have like 5 million or something. I don't know how many, like a lot. But at that stage, the way that podcasts came to Spotify was very different. We'd have to make individual deals with podcasts and with like podcast companies, so it wasn't like an open distribution system like we have now where you can upload your content quite easily to Spotify. So we do a lot more relationship building. So we built our relationship with like the BBC, Acast, other podcast companies, but we also did some commissioning, and because of my interest in sport, I saw a bit of a like white space for sports content. There's lots of interesting football podcasts, and there's a lot of football podcasts, but we did some cool stuff around women's football. We did some football documentaries with Mondial magazine, which were amazing. Won loads of awards for those. Not bragging or anything, but we did.
You're allowed.
Thank you so much. And then we did some really like short form, funny little bits. We did a thing called The Team Sheet with a company called Audio Always, who makes some really amazing stuff. And it was like a daily podcast where we get a celebrity on each week, and they would just like do their dream five-a-side team, like a day-by-day basis. So we just kind of messed around with a few interesting concepts. And then Spotify acquired The Ringer in 2020, and I moved over to The Ringer in 2021. So The Ringer's a very US-based company, or was when it was acquired, and was solely doing US content but wanted to do something in the UK. So they took on Stadio, which is a small football pod, and then they developed a concept with Ian Wright. I needed someone over here to start managing that, and I was like, well,
here we are.
I'll do it. And my role's just sort of grown then. So yeah, that's how I ended up here. I said I wasn't going to do a long version, but that felt like quite a long version. So there you go.
Not at all. Very interesting.
Sounds like a very full circle moment. You're back behind I
know,
the mic.
Does it feel like university again?
Does feel a bit like student radio, yeah. Although I feel like some of the student radio shows we did were very chaotic, and probably we'd had a few pints before. And I can say I have not had any pints today because it's 11 o'clock on a Friday.
All with our cup of water.
Keeping
Look,
hydrated. Yeah, exactly.
Taking you back, you mentioned obviously with Audio Boom when you had to go and like pitch podcasts to clubs and so on. How was that? Because obviously now people know what a podcast is. I'm sure a lot of people like approach you and tell you like, we want to do a podcast. Like, what's the best way to go about it? What was it like then when people didn't know maybe what a podcast is, the benefits of it, like how to position things? What was your pitch to them?
That's a really good question. I think back then it was much more people reversioning content they already had and then sticking it on an audio feed, as opposed to seeing a podcast as like a front and centre bit of content and like creating something that is specifically podcast. So back then we do, for example, like we'd work with newspapers who might have recorded interviews and they just wanted to put it out on an audio feed. It's not really a podcast, but it was audio distribution. So I think the proposition was very different then. And also the ad side of the business was nowhere near as developed as it is now. And obviously you want to be able to provide some sort of commercial proposition. That probably wasn't quite there then, or not in the way that it is now, where it's a really viable way of like maximising commercial reach. So it's a very different proposition, but I think there was definitely an opportunity to do something a bit interesting. So yeah, I think a very difficult, not a difficult sell, but just a bit more creatively about content and how it's distributed, as opposed to being like, you should make a podcast because they're really cool and in 10 years' time everyone's going to listen to loads of them. So yeah, I think there was a bit of learning and education that we were doing at that point.
And I think, you know, we're all working in sport at the moment. I know for us, at least Katie and I, we do have kind of a background in sport studies. We both have played sport. We still do or try. I know in the beginning of the year we did speak about some.
Yeah, we're not mentioning the H word because it's August and that's not happened.
What's the
I'll
H
whisper.
word? Are you being High Rocks girlies? I feel like
I'm not. Katie is, but
No. It was a New Year's resolution that 8 months down the line has not come to any sort of fruition.
You've still got 4 months left, though.
That's a great attitude to have, but I personally don't think it's going to happen.
It looks quite scary.
we can commit to be your fangirls. We'll be there to clap you.
Yeah, perfect. It's still not happening. I think I've scared myself out of it, actually.
Off topic a bit. What is High Rocks? Because I see it and I'm like, people are dragging bags around, they're running. I don't really
pulling stuff.
Yeah.
Smashing balls.
High Rocks is some people's version, I think, of hell. It's
okay.
Yeah, so I'm really selling it. No, I'm joking. Look, to do it is amazing. You're like literally like some sort of elite athlete. I don't know why I thought I'd put myself in that bucket. But it's essentially you run 8 kilometres, but in between every kilometre, you do some sort of very intense exercise, whether it be, I think it's like 100 wall balls or sled pulls, sled pushes, that sort of thing. And I mean, some of the elite athletes are doing this in under an hour.
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen Lucy Davis.
Oh, she's unbelievable.
Insane. Do you know her?
No.
So she's like an ultra athlete, I will say.
She might be the world champion. I don't know if I'm making this terminology up, but I think she's some sort of world champion of High Rocks, or
she's
close to.
Insane. Like, she's a legend. Like, she doesn't only do High Rocks, like she does ultra marathons.
Sure.
I saw a video of her, like, because her favorite component of the High Rocks is the sled pulls, and now she was pulling a whole F1 car.
I mean,
not one for us, maybe.
And there's little old me who plays netball 2 days a week. So.
but she's really inspiring. So for anyone who does want to do a High Rocks, just follow her.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that's where the initial inspiration came from for me.
Probably.
But,
what an absolute machine. I feel like running 8K by itself is enough. Like, why are we...
It's quite challenging.
What are we doing in between?
Yeah, but also, we're really going off topic here, but I quite like it. Trial running.
Yeah, so I've started running again recently, which I did a lot of running a few years ago. And then I had a pulmonary embolism, which was not a fun time.
Oh, wow.
And then I just kind of like stopped exercising really. But I've started running again and I really love it. So I've been going to a run club on a Tuesday night. I was telling you both before.
That's not the segue I was looking for, but you're opening up the doors now.
So I've had to have a week off, but I've been cycling a bit because it's obviously a bit more low impact. But yeah, running I really love. Like, I hated it when I was younger. I really did not like it at all. But I'm really enjoying it, and I'm really enjoying going to a run club as well because it's quite nice to be a bit accountable.
Social. And that,
Yeah, it's nice. It's
This
really,
sounds
really
like a
nice.
good matchup for a doubles team. So higher ups, you can do
you can do doubles.
You can do the
Oh.
running. Katie can do the in between sections. I don't know if
Yeah,
it
I'm
works
fine.
like that, but
Yeah, I'll do the bits in between.
Yeah, you can pull an F1 car around and I'll just, like,
And you'll just run
amble around.
Unfortunately, that's not how it works. I'll still have to run.
Oh, it's no fun.
Anyway, we can work something out.
Yeah, sure.
Empowering the future of sports industry leadership for everyone committed to fair representation in sport. You're now listening to the Sports Pro New Era podcast.
now that we've got the H word out the way, back to the original question was, obviously we all have a love and passion for sport, whether that's been, through studies, through actually playing the sport, watching the sport and so on. I think we're all really lucky to have jobs where we get to work in the sports industry. I personally love it. Like, it's amazing, the opportunities we have, the stuff we get to see. We've touched upon like women's sport and just seeing the trajectory there. You kind of touched on your dad being an influence, going to games from a young age and so on. What was it that you loved about sport and you wanted to kind of bring it into the job you do? How have you seen that change and develop over the last years?
Oh, that's a good question. Actually, my intention wasn't really to end up in sport when I first studied. Definitely when I was doing my masters, I just wanted to be a radio producer. I wasn't actually that kind of fussed about being a sports producer. There's always work in sport. And because I sort of I fell into an internship, I was really lucky to get that internship. And I really, really, really enjoyed it. I think especially producing or working on live sport, there's nothing like that, that thrill.
The thrill of it, yeah.
And just being able to be at I was talking to a mate about this who queued up to Wimbledon this year. He loves tennis. And he was, we should go down for the day. I was like, I've done my time. But I'm so lucky to be able to say I did 4 summers at Wimbledon and I've done it. I don't need to go back as a punter because I got to watch Serena Williams win it, sat in a commentary booth. I don't need to, do you know what I mean? It sounds like, so blasé about it, but I am incredibly lucky to have seen all that. So, as I say, my intention wasn't really to go into sport, but I had always loved watching it. Football particularly. My dad took me to my first football match when I was 5 and that was it. I was hooked and I still go and watch Walsall as much as I can for my sins, even after last season when I don't want to talk about that. But, so that kind of just inspired a bit of a passion, I suppose, and it's always just something that I've come back to and as a bit of an outlet. I think when you work in sport as well as loving it and having a passion for it, sometimes you have to kind of take a bit of a step back from it because it's very easy to be so in the weeds and be like, I work in it. It's a bit of a busman's holiday to go to a football match. And definitely when I was working on more live sport, to watch, we used to do lots of quite weird world feed commentaries at IMG. Be watching the Russian Premier League and then I'd be like, do I want to go and watch some League 2 football now? For pleasure when I'm I've just been watching lots of football this week. So I think it's really, really lovely to be able to be I've watched so much of it for my job that I don't want to go and watch it for pleasure. But we are really lucky. And I've worked on some really cool stuff and still working on loads of really cool stuff. And I think at the moment, because a big focus for us is women's football and women's rugby, women's sport more broadly, it's really nice to be able to be concentrating on that in the same way that we concentrate on men's sport, which would have been unthinkable 20, 25 years ago when I first sort of got into it. So, it's really nice.
Just quickly on that, you've spoken very fondly of Wimbledon, obviously. Was that one of your highlight moments or have there been others? Because I know we've had some cool experiences separately over the summer. I went to Wimbledon with Billie Jean King Cup. Billie Jean King was stood in front of me on centre court. It's the best experience of my life. And we were stood in the Wimbledon Museum and she was giving me tennis tips. So I had to mention that because it was I don't think I can go up from here, to be honest. I think it was the best moment of my entire life. But same question to you. I mean, have you had an experience with Billie Jean King, for one? No, I'm joking. But what were your other experiences that you really look fondly back at, or any recently that have really stood out?
Oh, good question. Wimbledon was amazing to work on because it was the first thing I did as well. That was a bit of a pinch me moment. I worked on a lot of golf at IMG as well. Really, really enjoyed golf. I'd never really watched it before, but I worked on a Ryder Cup and a couple of iterations of the Open, which was amazing. And I still really like golf now. I don't really work on it at all now, but I don't think I ever would have got into it before that. So that was lots of fun. Did a Rugby World Cup there as well. And then it's been really nice to work on those events in other jobs. So we have a men's rugby podcast that we look after here, the Rugby Pod, and they've covered the World Cup in 2023, and I got to go out for the first game of the World Cup to Paris to watch like France versus New Zealand, which was again like insane. So that was probably a highlight. I was at Wembley in 2022 when the Lionesses won the Euros as well.
Oh, nice.
Which was, I mean,
Yeah.
it was good stuff. It was really good stuff. So those are probably two of the more recent highlights. I think from a kind of content perspective and what we're working on, and what I mentioned before about the focus we have on women's sport now, that feels like a really nice highlight for me because, again, I just don't think I would have ever thought that possible when I first started my career. It just wasn't a thing. We just weren't thinking about it. So now that we think about it on a level playing field, and it's strategically as important to me as my men's sport podcasts, that feels like such a moment.
The podcasts that you're across I say all tap into different audiences, but they all have their certain audiences for sure. How do you decide which stories and talent to invest in? Or is that more on the sort of host and the content that they're putting together? How does that work?
That's a really good question. So we, I suppose, have grown the slate quite slowly and quite organically. So the Rugby Pod and Fozcast, which are probably our two biggest shows in terms of consumption in the slate, they were shows that already existed in the market, and we acquired them to sit with Spotify on a deal. And Fozcast originally sat in the Spotify original content slate, and we moved that over to the Ringer when we started expanding our Ringer slate in the UK and expanding our sports footprint, as it were. And I think we've then sort of looked at what we've had. We've kind of collected shows and been like, well, this would work quite nicely if we did this. The Ringer in the US, so they've got, I think, about 50 or 60 podcasts over there in their network. You hear a lot of the same talent on podcasts over there. So you'll hear the same voices on a few of their really big shows. We've kind of created a similar network effect here. So Righty's House was one of the first men's football shows that we worked up, and that was an original concept, so that didn't exist. That was brand new when we started it. And within that network of talent that Righty created around there, Flo was one of the people that did that, who presents Counterpressed, and obviously is probably one of the best women's football journalists in the country. We wanted to create some women's football content, and we were like, well, Flo's on Righty's House. It would make so much sense if we developed something with her. And then we have a nice little kind of cross-promo effect there, because you've heard Flo on Righty's pod. If you're interested in women's football, well, we've now got a place for you to go to listen to that. And I think we're also interested in like looking at the wider audience trends. So we knew that a massive thing Spotify's working on at the moment, and my colleagues on the UK partnerships team are doing a lot of work onboarding video creators, because we're now, front and centering video content on the platform. I was really interested in like the intersection between YouTube and podcast consumption. So we had Fozcast, and we knew that Ben's YouTube audience would be one that would be really movable to a podcast, if that makes sense. And we wanted to look at other kind of YouTube first creators that might make sense for us to sort of bridge a YouTube audience and a podcast audience. And James was a really obvious choice, because even though he's a football YouTuber, he's probably, and I say this is the best one in the world, he's probably a bit more grown up in his content than some football YouTube, the corners of the internet can be. And he feels like is a really great sort of bridge to kind of two sides of the slate we have. So we kind of have pieced it together that way. And I think we probably think about it as we take on one pod. It's sort of, well, what would work well there? How could we do that? And I think with the women's football stuff we've done and women's sports stuff more broadly, Flo's pod worked really well. Obviously we had Ian, who's such an ally for the women's game. He was really interested in doing a women's football pod. That made total sense. And then the Rugby Pod guys had seen what we'd done with women's football. And we're like, there's a World Cup next year. Why don't we do this? And Ellie and Jess were guests on the men's rugby podcast that we have, the Rugby Pod. But yeah, we were like, well, that's a really great idea. Why not? We may as well try it. So a little bit has been trial and error. But we've also been able to do trial and error, knowing that actually we've done something similar and it has worked really well. Nice. With the women's sports stuff that we've done, the available audience is proportionately smaller, but it does also open us up to different commercial opportunities as well that we probably don't have in another podcast that we do. So yeah, I think it's less been commercial considerations before. That's something we think about a bit more as well now, like how commercially can we pitch this to market, knowing what we know about which brands are spending money in the podcast space as well.
Yeah, and how have you seen kind of that demographic split? Obviously, there's always been quite a heavy male audience in terms of like sports content. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I think these women's sport, especially over the summer and the Rugby World Cup coming into play, probably the way you've positioned things have seen a shift kind of in the audience there as well. I don't know if you've got any stats or kind of just some overarching impressions in terms of how that skews, like in terms of gender split, age, and so on. What do those look like?
Off the top of my head, I think it really varies across our different pods. So for our men's sport pods, I would be surprised if you see like less than a 90% gender split in terms of male to female. It tends to be that it skews 92, 93% men listening to men's football pods. And that's pretty standard. Some of our pods have proportionately younger audiences than other. Again, Foscast probably has a slightly younger audience than Righty's House, and James's pod probably has a slightly younger audience as well. And then on our women's podcast side, it's probably, again, I haven't looked at it for a while. It's not quite 50-50, but it's certainly proportionately a lot more even compared to men's football content or men's rugby content. Maybe about 70% female skewing to 30% male. I don't know, I'd need to double check it, but I think it probably quite surprised me when I first looked at it. And I think the audience there is proportionately younger, certainly for, I think our women's rugby podcast, the audience is pretty young. And I've been to a couple of games. We did something with Saracens and Harlequins before, well, about 6 months ago now, and we did a little live show after a match, and I was just so surprised at how young like the crowd was there. But how much like they hero worship those girls. Like it's a very different kind of fan player relationship, and I think that probably bleeds over to the podcast content, how we expect like audiences to interact with that content. The audiences are smaller proportionately, but they're far more engaged. Not far more, but they're very, very engaged. And then also the ecosystem of content around it, so podcast socials and all that kind of thing. The engagement level is really, really, really super high. So I think that's a slightly different audience behaviour potentially.
Moving on slightly, I mean, back to sort of the wider women's sport broad ecosystem rather. Obviously you work very closely on the football and rugby side of things, but how do you think podcasting can help from the visibility and commercial growth standpoint for maybe other sports as well? Do you have any take on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a Cricket World Cup here next year, women's cricket, and that feels like an amazing run of massive events for like women's sport in England. I feel like we're very lucky here right now. And I think that can only benefit like the other home nations as well. And hopefully, I mean, using like Wales as an example, getting to the Women's Euros this year, first ever international tournament, I would assume, and I'm not anecdotally as opposed to scientifically, would that have happened if the Lionesses hadn't won in 2022? Like I feel like there's a lot more of a kind of broader benefit. If England are doing well, then it means that Wales, Scotland, Ireland are doing well, because a lot of those girls play in the WSL. It feels like there's a benefit to everyone for England doing well. Probably isn't the same in the men's game, really. So I feel like people being so excited about women's sport and it being so much more visible can only be of benefits to other sports as well. So the fact that we've got England have just won the Women's Euros, we've got a Rugby World Cup, and then we're going to have a Cricket World Cup, and it's all women's sport. Like, that feels like such good momentum. And I think using podcasts and the social media ecosystem that we now create around podcasts as well to increase that visibility is such a good way of getting people engaged and creating that engagement level and sort of maintaining it too, which can only be of benefits to brands as well, finding different ways that they can access audiences getting involved in sport and becoming interested in it. Again, I know I've said this before, I do think like audiences to women's sport podcast content is still proportionately smaller than what we see to men's podcast content, but that's because the audience for men's sport is still higher. That's just where we are with it. I mean, hopefully it's not always going to be the case. But I do think that we do need to find other ways of people to be able to access different kinds of sport and become like entry-level fans.
Yeah.
And I think podcasts provide a really good way of doing that. I would say that I'm biased, but I do think, as I said before, like the best podcasts are the ones where you listen to it and you become engaged because it's like,
you feel like you know the people talking.
Sure.
Basically.
So you become more interested.
Yeah.
And if you're a fan and then you discover a podcast because you're a fan of like Ellie or Jess or any of the other talent that we have on our books, the fact that you can then like listen to them each week and then become even more interested, it feels like just a net positive to me. So
Yeah, I think it's something we, cover a lot we discuss quite a bit in terms of like what a fan is. Whether that's, I know it's spoken a lot in terms of like women's sport and the female fans, but I think this could apply to like men and young boys as well. It's like, what's your entry point to sport? Like you mentioned, you went to matches when you were really young and so on. And I think it's also interesting how you are exposed to other sports during your later life. Like I was speaking earlier, like I'm a huge fan of Elena Marr. And I think she's done an incredible job at showcasing what the sport is, what a woman who plays rugby is. And I will say it openly, I have not sat through and watched an entire rugby match, but I do want to go to the Rugby World Cup. I do want to see her. I do want to see her content. So I think if people understand that you can enter a sport through a very different way than what you traditionally have, I think it opens up so many opportunities there. And I'm sure there's more ways to than what I have experienced. And I think, is there any kind of podcast or show that you think has really like kind of pushed the needle on that front? Like, I think what you mentioned about like Friends, like I think Ella Toon and Alessia Russo, like they have such a nice vibe. You see their content and you just enjoy it. I don't know whether it's like a sports podcast or any other podcast. Like, are you a fan of anything? Is it something that kind of inspires you when you're having conversations of like, we could do this in sport as well?
Oh, that's a good question. I think to your point about Ella Toon and Alessia Russo's pod, that I'm so like delighted to see the amount of other women's football pods there are. I don't think it's a case where like if we see another like football pod being launched, like a men's football pod, it's like, oh God, another one. But like I do think it's like all ships rise with the tide, if I've got that phrase right. So I think it's such a nice time to see like Alessia Russo and Ella Toon doing a pod, Jill Scott and Karen Carney doing a podcast together, and just like all of these different voices within women's football, whether they're current players or former players or journalists. It just feels like there's a really broad, nice a broad like set of podcasts that have come out like over the past couple of years when it comes to women's football, and the best ones are where the chemistry, and this is across all genres, this is not just a sport specific thing, the best podcasts are the ones where there is a really kind of natural nice chemistry between hosts or between host and guest. I'm not sure that I think about that too much when we're commissioning stuff, but a pod that I love and listened to the latest episode this morning is Lily Allen and Makita Oliver's podcast, Miss Me, because they've been friends since they were kids, and like you can tell like there's a level of chat that they have that you can't, that's not synthetic, like you cannot engineer that. So that feels like a really good example of a podcast where the chemistry is really good. But I do think that is a formula that we would apply to podcasts when we're thinking about how we commission. We've either had podcasts that we've acquired that have already had like everything set up and done and we like it, so we'll take it on board. And then we have so James Alcott's pod's a good example. He'll get guests on. He has regular co-hosts that will come on like once a month, but otherwise we leave it to him to choose his guests, and he's really good at choosing great guests that he has great chats with. So I think that's also down to the hosts and how good they are at engaging with their guests, and that's what we think about, is like how compelling is that person's talent.
Empowering the future of sports industry leadership for everyone committed to fair representation in sport. You're now listening to the Sports Pro New Era podcast.
Obviously, Katie, in the beginning, you did mention that Alex is part of the New Era class, which I'll let you do a little kind of briefing in terms of like what the New Era program is for anyone who's kind of new listening to this, so that you can give some more context on that front. But I think it would kind of be great to also hear after Alex what kind of interactions you've had with the various kind of mentors on there. It's quite broad in terms of like the inspiration you can get on the sports front and like kind of the women's sports business side of it. So I'll pass on to you, Kay, to give some more info around that.
Yeah, so our New Era programme, we launched it 3 years ago now, which has flown by. Alex is in our third cohort. It is essentially a 12-month coaching and sort of personal brand building program that we run at Sports Pro. So the coaching elements are our cohort each year who apply are paired with certain steering group members who are C-suite director level women across the industry, from the likes of the Premier League, the NBA, all these incredible rights holders and brands that you hear about. And that sort of coaching carries on throughout the 12 months. And then from a Sports Pro side as well, having a global platform that we do, we offer opportunities for the class and the steering group as well to come and speak at our events, write thought leadership on our website, come on podcasts with us, here we are, and basically give them a voice in the industry and give them opportunities that often, unfortunately, they may not get because of not necessarily just their male counterparts, but various other reasons as well. So that is essentially New Era in a nutshell. We also have our wider community, given the incredible response that we had to the programme in the first year that we launched it. So similar opportunities there, coming to our events, whereas maybe they often wouldn't get the opportunity to come to them. We have a newsletter monthly with all about women's sport and women in sport content. We do virtual webinars, all sorts, basically. So if you're interested in joining that, it's free. Please come along. But Alex, back to the question.
What's your experience been like, and kind of has there been any kind of conversations that you've had with the mentors or even kind of other people in the cohort that has changed your vision kind of in terms of like women's sport, what it's all about? Like personally, I have found that we have so many common denominators that I didn't expect we would have. So yeah, what's your experience been like?
I've really, really enjoyed it. It's been so lovely. I've been given some great mentors who I've had some really good chats with, which has been great. And I think that's one of the reasons I applied. Like I have a really weird job. Because I'm like, I work in podcasts, but also work in sport.
Yeah.
I don't really know anyone else that does a job like mine. And because I'm a bit of a one-woman band here, like it's quite difficult to be like, oh, I'm good at that, so I should do that, or like have just a wider perspective on stuff. So it's been quite interesting to have a couple of mentors who've been really, really helpful in terms of working out what I'm doing and what I want to do, I suppose. So Louise, who works for Carlsberg, is one of my mentors. She's incredible, and we've worked through like some coaching stuff, and I think that has really helped me, not from a kind of work perspective, more from just like a, how do you feel about these things? How do you react in this situation? Like that's just stuff that you don't really get the time to have some perspective over.
It's as much as like a personal coaching program as it is professional, which I think wasn't something we necessarily expected when we first launched it, but that it's just come very naturally. And I think, I mean, they're so clearly linked anyway, but 100%. I think it is just having that sort of personal, like, I don't know, advice as well at the same time.
And a sounding board. I think that can be really, really hard to come by. It's been really nice to sort of meet other women in my cohort and just have like a little network and a little like collective of people. Like, we've been to pints. We like after the Sports Pro one night at the Sports Pro conference. We ended up in the pub till closing time, and that was great. Just to like just chat with people who are doing similar jobs to you and sort of get different perspectives on what's going on. So that's been really, really, really valuable. And having a network that I would feel comfortable just being like, I've done this. What do people think about this? Or like, how would I approach this? Does anyone know this person? Like, that's really, really, really nice. And I think, as you said before, the sports industry is not always the friendliest of places if you're a woman. I do think that's changing. I think it's markedly different from when I first started working in the sports industry, way back in the 1700s. But like, I do think that it's really nice to know that there are people who do have your back a little bit. Even if you don't necessarily do a similar job at all, I think there's probably a lot of universality in terms of things we might encounter or ways that we might approach things. It's really, 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 really nice. And I think that women supporting women thing is really, really important. And I do think it is, it feels very kind of emblematic of that everyone is very supportive, which is really nice. And I think one thing that I've learned through my mentorship stuff is that I'm not very good at like my networking, or I have like a big network, but I'm not very good at maintaining it. So it's really nice to have been given like a network of people and not having to feel nervous about reaching out to someone or like anxious about asking for an introduction. I think it's been really nice to know that there's a ready-made network there, like the WhatsApp group. There's always something in there. And it's always nice to see, I can't remember who it is, but someone got put on the leaders 40 under 40 list the other day. And someone, and like just to see the messages, everyone was so happy. Yeah. And that's really nice. There's no like level of professional jealousy. It's just like, that's great. Well done. Which is really nice. And I think probably quite rare to have that. So
I think networking is like a tough thing. Like I always struggle to do it, but I think that's why kind of with New Era we've always we have at every kind of sports pro conference to do kind of a coffee meetup at the start of the day.
It's really important, I think,
because it's so hard walking into these conferences where it's primarily men, and it's like I always feel like I have to interrupt someone's conversation, like, oh, hi, excuse me, I just wanted to say hi.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when you first start, if you're kind of starting out in your career, even like when you're not, going to conferences or going to events or going to stuff can feel so daunting when you're in a massive room full of loads of people, invariably men, because we work in the sports industry. Just to have one friendly face makes such a difference, instead of you just like drinking endless coffee and staring at your phone and being like, I don't know what to do. Like, it's just so nice to have that, again, like ready-made network of people. So yeah, it's great. It's really good.
And obviously, you know, you've had various experience across your career. There'll be more to come for sure. But if you kind of zoom out of everything you've done, what would be the advice you'd give yourself, kind of taking a step back, like if there was anything either that you did really well and you're proud of, or that you might have done different?
Oh my God.
Or advice from Louise or any of your mentors as well. If
Yeah.
that's... I don't think I could answer that question. It's a great question. But
It is. My gosh. I'm just like Rolodexing through 15 years to be like, what should I have done? I think probably the networking point I raised, like I've always found it really difficult to like, I'm always very jealous of colleagues or friends of mine that just don't find that difficult. Like,
just naturals.
yeah. And I've found, and like once I know someone, I'm absolutely fine. But it's just that like, first step of being like, I don't want to bother this person. But yeah, I think that's probably something that I would, yeah. And that's something I still struggle with now. And I think it's probably something that my younger me, it felt like I probably sort of fell into things that ended up being really cool. Like I kind of sort of, I mean, part of that is luck and part of that is I worked harder than I probably realised I did. I think that's probably some advice I give. I would work less hard. And this sounds like a weird one.
No,
but
I agree, given my experience as well.
there was one point where I think I was doing 6 days a week and then I'd freelance in spare time. A, because like living in London is expensive, but B, because I was like, I need to do these things and I need to build my portfolio and do these things. And then for what? Like I missed out on loads of really good nights out. And like, that's probably something where I'm a bit like, it's just a job at the end of the day. We're very lucky to do really, really cool jobs and get to do loads of really cool stuff. And I work for a really cool company and with loads of really lovely people. Very lucky, but it is, I think, a level of perspective is sometimes needed. And I don't think I've always had that perspective. So that's probably something that I would say to like 27-year-old me, now that I'm 10 years down the line, I'm like, you probably should have just like had a sit down, you know, just, you know. So that's probably something. And then I think, yeah, that perspective. I think also because the podcast industry and the sports industry, as you said before, they're big industries but small in that everyone does kind of sort of know everyone else or knows someone who knows everyone else. So I think that does mean that, and this is something I'm terrible for, like comparison is a thief of joy. So I'm like, oh, that person's got that job. Why didn't I get that job? Like, or that person's doing that thing. Why am I not doing that thing? Like, then you sort of feel like professional jealousy. That's something that I think I got really caught up in. And I think, sure, that's still really easy to do, like in the age of Instagram and LinkedIn where everyone's posting all of the things.
And sometimes some titles and some jobs seem really cool. But I've heard people who have jobs at amazing organizations, or at least I think they're amazing. And then once I've spoken to them, they've said their experience has not been great.
Very different, yeah.
Very different. So I think sometimes we have to be content with what we have.
100%.
Always strive, you know, for more and better and so on. But sometimes it's not a flashy organization or a job title that makes a difference. I don't know, Katie, have you got any advice you'd like to share or
Not really.
lived experience?
No, I think I just agree with you, Alex, to be honest. I think having perspective has been a big thing for me, even over the past few months, to be completely frank. I think, but even if I'm throwing it back to my uni days where I tried so hard. And like, it's funny now, because at the time it was like, well, obviously I work so hard and that's just a me thing. Like, I got like 97% on my master's dissertation or something, which...
Whoa.
But like,
insane.
why? But like, what was the point?
No,
Do you know what I mean?
I had a
you
similar
could say
thing.
in a podcast and be like, I got 97% of my master's stuff. And we can go,
This is a
amazing.
moment, Katie. That was
Yeah,
what
yeah.
it was for. See, I've had this discussion because I have a twin brother and we are polar opposites. Like, I remember my mum telling me, Elena, you can close the books, you can close the laptop, you've studied enough. And she'd walk into my brother's room and he's still on the same like page of his math book and watching Britain's Got Talent. So that was George, living a stress-free life.
I love
But
how you're watching that in Greece as well.
yeah.
Yeah, it really travels.
Simon Cowell, you know. But yeah, so he did, you know, he passed everything. He's got a great job now and so on. And I was there like crying my eyes out, feeling like I was going to have a heart attack. And you're like, all this for what? Like, I was still going to pass my exam. I didn't need to get over a 90. Any application you would send, I don't think they would ever care about. Kind of, they just look at the university and the degree. So, you know, but at the same time, like, my opinion is kind of, you did what felt right then for you.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, we can, you know, look at things in retrospect and say we could have done something else different. But I think the only thing I would say is, like, don't be scared to ask questions or take advice from people. I've always kind of felt that you have to keep hustling and keep showing that you're strong and that you're in control of situations. But I think there come times, like I've had conversations with Katie as well about certain things, that you don't have to have all the answers for them or pretend like you're okay with everything. So I think having someone in the industry male, female, older, younger, whatever, someone that you can, openly talk about certain things is so important. And I think it's important to try find someone like that in the industry at any point in your career. So I think that would kind of be my advice.
Yeah,
That's a great shout. Yeah, like a mentor figure who you can soundboard stuff with.
100%.
I think that's a really good shout.
Even if it's a peer mentor, like you said.
Yeah.
Like within your company, outside your company, your mum, I don't know.
Mom's heard everything.
Yeah. I was just going to forget that I said that. I mean, I talked to my mum about everything as well, but maybe not. She doesn't know the ins and outs of my job, but still.
Cool. To wrap things up, now that we've given people our advice, we've said big things coming in terms of women's sport in the next months, next year, and so on. What are we most excited for?
I'm so excited for the World Cup. I'm so excited. Hopefully going to get some games. I'm really excited for it. Having worked on a couple of men's World Cups, I'm so excited to have like a women's World Cup on home soil because I just think it's such a pivotal moment for women's rugby. And I think, again, seeing what the Lionesses did over the summer just feels like such a good moment. That's super exciting. What else am I excited about? It's Friday. So it's not a weekend. No,
It could be anything. It doesn't have to be sports related.
Oh no, I'm actually going to go a little bit off piece. It's something that I'm actually wanting to look into more, but we've got the Winter Olympics next February.
Yeah.
oh my gosh.
True.
Which is crazy. And granted, it's in Milan, so it's not in the UK, but fine.
A little trip
but
opportunity.
yeah.
So if it's in Milan, that's great. We can just
Yeah.
watch the Olympics 2 weeks and not do any work.
just
can't
have
we?
a long weekend in Milan. I don't mind that at all. But I think I'm looking forward to that. I think our snow sport sort of side of things in the UK is pretty strong. So I'm very just intrigued to see how that goes. And it's definitely something I'm going to be following.
No,
Yeah.
wait, do you know what? I don't know really anything about that
No,
world at all.
I follow the Summer Olympics religiously.
Yeah,
but
same.
the Winter Olympics, it's always interested me, but I've just never, I don't know, it's just not as big as a thing in the UK.
Yeah.
I don't feel anyway.
Oh, I'm excited. I'm now excited for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
I was like, it's just more sports to watch,
it's cool,
I suppose.
isn't it? Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But I just don't know anything about that world, so I suppose, that would be a good... My partner's a big skier. He used to live in Austria, so he knows a lot more about it than I do, and like he'll watch it, and I've got no idea what he's watching, but I feel like now I probably need to be a bit more engaged with it.
Yeah.
But
Amazing. No,
What about
but
you?
I think I'm really excited about the rugby because I think it will be a big moment. It's going to, hopefully, as you said, like England are the favourites to take it home. So I think just kind of like having that double win for women's sport here will be incredible. And kind of just more excited to see what happens off the back of that.
Yeah, agree.
Because we've had like a huge moment in women's football right now. Hopefully, like whatever the outcome is, it will be a big thing for women's rugby as well. So then it's like, what's next?
Yeah.
That for me is kind of what I'm looking forward to.
That's a really good point. What is next, I suppose? And then how does the game, rugby, grow domestically on a club level as well as international level?
Yeah.
I think what's really cool that they've done is obviously there's only, is it one match that's actually in London and all the rest are dotted around
Yeah,
the
that's
country?
what I'm
So
saying. It's great.
actually, wherever you are in the UK, you're actually pretty close to a match. So I think at least that exposure from an on-the-ground perspective, I think could be massive, especially with the younger audiences.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because the first game with England play the US, don't they? And is that in Sunderland, maybe?
Yes. Oh, it's up there somewhere.
It's in the northeast. I feel like it's in the northeast. That again, you're right. It feels like it's not just Twickenham, or it's not just like what we would consider rugby heartlands. Like it's all over the place, which is great. But I think it's going to be. It'll be interesting to see how brands and the RFU and like the WIU and all the the unions look at how they capitalise on it afterwards. I think it's great to have that moment and be really in it. But how do we develop the game and push it further along? And I suppose part of that does fall on what commercial opportunities are there. How does it become viable for the athletes? How does it become viable for everyone, really? But super
Hopefully
exciting.
we'll be able to cover more of that as well in the following episodes. But Alex, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure, first of all, to chat through everything you've been across, but also being here in these studios. It's like nice and professional.
It is very nice and professional. I feel it. It is. Confirmed.
It is. And hopefully we'll have more opportunities to do more episodes in here. But thank you both very, very much.
Thank you.
Empowering the future of sports industry leadership for everyone committed to fair representation in sport. This is the Sports Pro New Era podcast.